Hey everybody, welcome to another segment of Tony's show. Um, we're going to be all over the place, AI and more AI and AI and AI. Hey, everyone's been, crazy about this coronavirus and frequencies and 5G and all the other distractions going on. And I noticed something. Excuse me, I noticed something. Maybe some of you have noticed it as well, but I noticed something. I notice now people have become weapons. Let me explain. We're reading about China having this outbreak of this coronavirus. And initially, what it was targeting was Asians, Vietnamese, Thailand, Hong Kong, Japan, mainland China. Almost the whole Asian perimeter was being hit with the coronavirus. And then all of a sudden now we're getting feedback from people coming from China to whatever respective country that they've gone to, France, United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, whatever, United States, Canada, and maybe many other places that we haven't heard. Now it dawned on me for a minute. Says, now you know what? If this contagion is as bad as they're saying it is, then there should have been a moratorium on travel. You think they would have shut down every access point that this possibly could have leaked out, but they didn't. And they said they did, but obviously they didn't. We're looking at the whole enchilada here on what's going on. So then it dawned on me. Said, well, that would be the perfect weapon of assault. Wouldn't it? Biological weaponry. Since you can't, everyone's got signed some sort of conventional, treaty. We're not going to use biological weapons because of the level of devastation they could cause, and the long-term devastation they could cause is immeasurable, just immeasurable. You could literally blight out a civilization without thinking twice. Imagine if China decided they were going to release some sort of pathology on Hong Kong. Oh, you wiped out a whole segment of Hong Kong, you burn it down to the ground, you rebuild it, and you start over. Just a perspective. I'm not saying that they're going to do it, and I'm not insinuating they're going to do it, so don't put words in my mouth either that I'm saying, oh, China's going to start a biological war with Hong Kong. But the point I'm trying to say is you could literally now start a biological assault just by sending your people on an airplane to travel anywhere across the planet, and they could be innocently just going about their business, visiting family, friends, relatives, whatever, people that they haven't seen in a long time, can now be afflicted with something, transport that something, and when it gets to the destination, now it gets released. Now here's an interesting thing about that too. See, I'm of the mindset that this is, and I said this prior to all this stuff coming out, that this is a genetically engineered material using nanotechnology, nanobiology, nanobiotech. And it seems that the problems we may be having in Asia might be because of the frequencies and the amount of frequencies that are being utilized with their 5G or 6G network. They may already be at 6G. We really don't know. But this is the means of assault, the means of activation, because anybody who's been infected or affected this other nonsense going on, whatever the theme of the day is that they're defining, it just seems to me that with the nano, you have to have an access point, you have to have some kind of activation, and it also has a program. put a movie out there. Somebody sent me this movie to see on Daily Motion, and I saw it, and I thought it was interesting because everything it was saying, or everything it displayed, we've been saying for over a decade. You cannot directly assault it. If you do directly assault it, it will morph, change, adapt. And in this, they displayed this to the T. They tried to initiate a program shutdown, but because the nano constructs work as a gestalt or a group or a community, they adapted to the shutdown and wouldn't shut down. And when the person was being put through certain tests and certain, examinations, the nano programming looked at what was going on to the host and decided to make the modifications required so that the host could survive in that environment. Now, isn't that interesting? A programmable consortiums of particulate matter incorporated with DNA is now assessing and determining what to do in order to sustain the host so that the host can survive. Imagine that. Artificial intelligence operating in a human host, or a man and a woman, and determining what to do without any outside interference, because it has a program paradigm in order for it to follow in regarding to determining what the best route to take in order to protect the host. Altering the host, creating a morphology with the host. This goes on with nanopoisoning. A lot of you think that you've been assaulted with Lyme, assaulted with Morgellons, assaulted with all kinds of whatever bullshit of the day, or the spice of the day is. And you've tried all kinds of things, antibiotics, and you've tried, antifungals and anti-mold and anti-this and anti-that. You even went to the doctor and got some antibiotics, and you've gone through the whole gamut, and then you've gone and got treated for Lyme, and you've gotten treated for some sort of autoimmune disorder, and nothing works. Initially, you find some kind of release, some kind of hope, some kind of spark, and then nothing works. You ever thought of why it doesn't work? Did it ever come to anybody's mind as to the reason why it isn't working? What they're doing? Has it ever occurred to somebody that perhaps there's a program paradigm inside of you that might look at the poison you're taking from the pharmaceutical company and maybe negating or neutralizing it? Did you ever think that? Did you ever think possibly that because you were being mistreated? So I can play that word game too, mistreated. And why am I saying the word mistreated? Because you are not being treated correctly for the condition that's assaulting you. You are being mistreated by giving the wrong compounds or the wrong materials from the pharmaceutical industry. And they know damn well that these things are not going to work on what they're giving you. But they will make money. They will collect their insurances. And the experiment continues in its morphology and changing you and altering your DNA or your structure or whatever it is that's going on. Or it may be manufacturing something within your system because they need a component, or they're just testing out how this is working with biology. And you happen to be the perfect host for their experiment. See, when I look at all these things that have been going on, and I've been around for a while, and we look at all the viruses that have come over the years. The 90s was the year of the Asian viruses, all the Asian flus. Remember that? We had the Hong Kong flu, the Japanese flu, the Thailand flu, the Vietnamese flu. We had the flu from the Philippines. We had the flu from, Bingo, Bango, Bongo, whatever country it was coming from. But it was happening every year. Every year there was a new type of Asian flu. And nobody caught on that this was being done in a lab. And still nobody's catching on. It astounds me most of the time when I see some of the media nonsense, and I'm just completely flabbergasted that nobody can actually see this game. It's right in front of your noses. It's right there. They basically are just laughing at you. They're just basically putting their thumb on their noses and wiggling their fingers and saying, "You dumbass, you can't see what is obviously in front of you." This has been going on for quite some time. The health food industry is another place that's notorious for bullshit. It's unbelievable the bullshit coming out of the health food industry today. And what's being propagated as health, and some of these gurus, doctor gurus, goofy gurus, whatever kind of guru you want to talk about, are not even looking at the substances that they're selling, nor the components and the compounding of these components with the materials that they're putting them together with. And the point I'm making here is because now on a nano scale, with the right material, nanomaterials can now be engineered. Now here we go. I've been saying for the longest time that the cellulose materials, the hypercross carmelose, the hypermellose, and all those things that end with OSE and encapsulation because they had to get something for the vegans, because the vegans, oh, God forbid, if they have a little bit of meat in them, that might actually fix their brain, even though they are already eating meat and meat products and they don't even realize it. Well, I'm a vegan, I don't touch meat. Right. You're eating meat because they're coating your vegetables with some sort of, I guess it would be a hydrogel material that's made out of protein, animal protein. And when they use the cow shit, what do you think that is? It's fertilized the field, or sheep shit, or goat shit. What do you think that is? Oh, protein. All kinds of it. Coming from a cow, or a goat, or a sheep, or a chicken. But when we're looking at all these things that are happening and transpiring, nobody is paying any close detail to what is really happening or how these things are mixing. And like I said, the health food industry today, when you're buying pills, a lot of these pills today, the capsules and whatnot, the caplets and tablets are the worst of all of them. And then you get the encapsulation. And when they're adding silicon dioxide and titanium dioxide and any other kind of metallic material, aluminum, whatever, what happens when you consume these materials inside your intestinal tract, your gut, your stomach, whatever, your esophagus? What happens to these materials on their way to being digested? Do they actually break down, or is a chemical reaction happening with some of these components that may be causing a construct to form? The relationship today with nano and biology, there's almost indistinguishable. You won't be able to tell them apart. And now with artificial intelligence in the game too, and it's becoming more and more, you can see the connections more and more. They're now talking that these social people that can study the interactions of people and communication networks are now saying that bots can now talk and communicate on a parity with people. In other words, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. Imagine that. You could be talking to a bloody machine and you wouldn't even know it. See, I'm pointing all these things out to you because of the nature of the deceptions that are going on the planet and how we are being manipulated and maneuvered into a position where, again, accessibility to your DNA and accessibility to you is going to become more and more and more accessible. See, nobody's saying no to vaccines. Now, with the coronavirus, everybody's going to run to, I need a shot. Oh, quick, put a needle in me. Oh, shove it in, shove it in deep. Oh. I was being a bit of a dink there, but you get the point. You know, it's stupidity at its climax, because nobody is following the theme here. Initially, we went to it. I mean, this is another viral attack, another thing to shift the pattern, another thing to see how stupid people have become, how gullible people are becoming, without actually looking at anything. And then I'm seeing all these reports about taking megadoses of this and megadoses of that that's going to stop this virus. This is the problem with these things that these guys are saying. They're looking at research dated back in 1970 and 1960, which was true then. And I don't doubt there's a lot of things that they're suggesting have benefit and merit today, but not against something that has been diabolically altered, engineered, and changed. The old methods of yesteryear are not going to work the same way that they did back then, because back then these things were strictly biological. There wasn't this integration of nanotechnology or nanobiology like we have today. And because we were being exposed to so many different frequencies, which is also altering our DNA, and which is also accessing this program in your system, that some of the things that you're hearing as solutions, and I'm saying this not to discourage you, but I'm saying this so that you have a realistic perspective of what you're dealing with. You cannot equate a coronavirus of today, 2020, to the same coronavirus that we had back in 1980. They're not the same. Even if you were to think in terms of evolution in this regard, it would have had over, 40 years from 1980 to have evolved and become a little bit changed up. But this drastic change that we're seeing that's causing all this blight and issue is not a normal evolutionary change. It had a lot of help. I point the same thing out with the H1N1. When the H1N1 came out, the vaccine was actually more toxic than the virus. But within a 7 or 8 month time frame, they were saying that that virus had mutated from an H1 to H7N1 to N9. That is virtually impossible unless, again, it had help. And the point I'm trying to make here is I don't want people to believe or put their faith in any kind of medical establishment, because you are going to be hooped and looped into their system, and there will be no escaping it. Imagine, after watching that movie I talked about, imagine watching your body go into a certain morphology and start to change and alter, and all of a sudden starts to evolve, because at an exponential rate, at an unnatural rate, putting things in the body, assembling things in the body that could, again, because of your environmental exposures, the epigenetics of that is affecting your genetic code, could in fact activate a program to turn something on, to create something that would be completely abnormal. We are going to see this. This is going to be very prevalent. We're already seeing it now in ways with the sexuality. Talking about transsexuals, and again, not knocking the people in any way, shape, or form, but that is an experiment. When you have somebody having an induction of material inside their system that is causing them to become completely disorientated to their own personal sexuality, they're a boy yet they think they're a girl and they think they're a boy, that's an experimentation, that's an exploitation of what's going on with the current technology and the current trends. this is going to become more and more prevalent. The normal heterosexual relationship is on the verge of becoming an extinction. The more this becomes propagated and the more this becomes accepted as some kind of normalcy, okay, the more that heterosexuality is going to go down the toilet. People do not want to make babies today because of the environment that bringing a child into is not acceptable to people that are even thinking about conceiving. Now, the other interesting thing, too, about all this is, okay, the rights of transsexuals. Transsexuals already have all the same rights that we do. There's still people living in whatever country you're living in. You still have the perspective and the concept that you are a citizen of a country. So that by default gives you the same rights or lack of rights that the rest of us have. And I'm saying that quite straight. The lack of rights the rest of us have. And because they are making a distinction so clearly in regarding to a transsexual over I say a heterosexual. Again, if you're heterosexual and you're a man, oh God forbid, you got a penis that can get erected and can actually insert DNA into a woman to produce a real child, manifestation of a DNA of a man and a woman. God forbid that happen. Oh my gosh, that's what were we thinking? But it's okay if you prefer to have the same sexual orientation for somebody, even though nothing comes of it except disease and death. So that makes no sense, does it? But this is becoming the bizarro norm. And when people says, "Well, you're judging these people," I'm not judging anybody. I am actually saying they've got the same rights people already have, the rest of us already have, or the lack of rights that everybody also has. So I'm not even putting them in any position other than where everybody's at. The only difference is now is they have been targeted or singled out for this experiment that's going on. This is not normal. I got to tell y'all, this is not normal. It never was normal. It never will be normal. Concept of the Bible saying God made Adam for Eve and not Steve, and Eve for Adam and not Adam. This is a little bit of a paraphrasing on my end, but the point is, Adam and Eve were made for man and woman. And they had children. And you don't hear anything about Eve having any kind of unusual relations with any other woman, or Adam having unusual relations with any other man. It's not something you hear or read. I'm sure somebody's going to distort that as well. If it's biblical, I am going to tell the rest of you who are believers or those who read the Bible, if it's biblical, somebody, somewhere, some way, somehow is going to come up there and create some kind of defiling of the biblical truths that are in there. Because most people don't read the Bible that they should read it. And if they did read the Bible, they might be surprised what it actually might say. And this applies to everybody. I always tell people to read the New Testament because we are under a new covenant. We are not under an old covenant for another people. We are under a new covenant because of what has transpired. So when I tell people to read these things, again, not to try to push any kind of religion on you, but at least read it. I always point out in the biblical truths, I don't read the Bible like some religious person. I look at the Bible from, in a different angle. I look at when God created the heavens and the earth, and created all the things on the earth, that he was using frequencies. And when he spoke the word, that too was a frequency. And every time he created something of any magnitude, whether it was the universe that he created, everyone was crying out to the universe, "Oh, great universe." Why not just cry out to God? He made the universe. But anyhow, the point is, when he made the universe, when he spoke the word, that was a frequency for the universe. When he spoke the word and created the planets, that was a frequency for the planets. When he spoke the word and created the foundation of the planet and the water and the land and the aquatic system, everything had a frequency. Everything. When Jesus, fed the 5,000 with the 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, That was a frequency. He was able to alter the, I guess, the chemistry, if you will, or the components, the proteins. So they was able to feed everybody, and at the end of it all, they were able to collect, so many baskets of leftover food. That's a frequency. When he walked on the water, that's another frequency. He was able to, again, to not defy gravity, but change the frequency so he could do what he did. When he says, if you say to this mountain, be thou removed, be thou cast in the sea, that's a frequency. You're doing what God did on a smaller scale, obviously, because you're not creating any universes, but you're able to tell the obstacles or obstructions in your life to move. That's a frequency. And when you start looking at these things in accordance to some of the things going on and how Christ was showing us that we could manifest what he was doing. In fact, matter of fact, he says we will be able to do greater works than he did because he went to the Father. But this is the empowering fact of understanding frequencies. And when you read the scriptural references, you can see these things. Well, hopefully you can see these things and not get caught up in the religiosity of whatever the churches are teaching you today, because majority of the stuff there, again, it's another one of those things that you really got to examine what you're reading anymore and what you're hearing from these ministers. Some of them may be well intended, some of them are just bullshit, but you really got to read for yourself and figure that out for yourself. If you don't, I always tell people, you don't understand God, talk to God about it. That's a frequency. Prayer is a frequency. You're lining up, you're tuning in to a higher frequency, to God's frequency. So when we're talking about a lot of these things that are going on today and how frequencies are being negatively used to alter our genetic code, our DNA, how AI systems are being implemented to, again, regulate frequencies and access different directories or whatever to create whatever frequency required. I don't believe in the Mandela effect. I think that's just a lot of nonsense. I think what we really have been seeing is, again, this is my perspective and my take on it. What I think we're seeing is the AI network changing frequencies right under our noses, instituting a new program, again, right under our noses, and we're misguided, again, by whatever nonsense, again, to mislead us from seeing the actual reality of what is causing the issues. Some say, well, AI hasn't always been here. AI has been here. It just went into sleep mode. If you look at the historical aspects, I don't care if you read the Vedic books, I don't care if you read the Quranic books or the Hebrew books or the biblical or the Bible or even anything from the Buddhists, there was always some kind of reference of some kind of intellect. And if we're looking at the fact that in the past they already had nuclear weapons and they'd actually used them, because there's regions between China and India that are still emitting high levels of radiation that could have only been created by some powerful explosives or many explosives, that would also indicate that they would have had to have some sort of advanced system to be able to control those weapons. And again, somebody say it's a stretch, but Alexander the Great had robots in his military. Okay, that's a frequency. In order for those things to work, they had to have a program, and that program would have had to be operated by a frequency. There was another guy who found another architectural imprint on a building in France, indicating, again, robots were around way back then. A lot of our history has been lost and buried. And it seems like at every turning point of civilization, when it's crashed, crumbled, and fell apart, that the information was also lost, buried, or kept from being in the surface. And I think when we start looking at all the different histories that we've been told, we only get a superficial view of history. We don't get to see a lot of the history. And a lot of devices have been discovered from the past. So there was one device I was reading the other day, they still don't know what it did or how it worked. And some of the structures that were built in the past, some of the more intricate structures, you have to wonder if they already had nanotechnology to assemble and build these things. It seems like it's the only logical way that it could have been done. Well, they had one hell of a 3D or 4D printer back in those times that they actually printed these materials and assembled them as they were being created through a 3D printing process. It's like I said, a lot of times when we're looking at a lot of things, we have to again determine in this realm and reality where we're at today at 2020. 01312020. It might be a computer code or an AI code that on this day these things are going to manifest based on the frequency that these numbers may be programming or attenuating. Again, this is just a perspective here, a hypothesis or a concept for you to grasp that nothing is done today that it doesn't have a reason for. Why are the days of the week named after either Greek or Nordic gods or aliens? Not gods, they're aliens. I mean, does that make sense? Why do we have 7 days in a week, not 8 or 9 or 10? Does that make sense? These are subtle things that we don't know. I mean, I believe the Aztec calendar had 13 months in their year. They had, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 28 or 29 days each month, which equated to 365 at the end of 13 months. Again, my numbers might be wrong there on that one, so don't quote me on it completely. But when you're looking at this, these numerical systems, everything is on numbers. The dates are all numbers. Why? Why are we so caught up on numbering the days? Again, is that a program or a frequency of the day? These are things that we should be asking ourselves and questioning. These are because nothing should be assumed anymore. We still get into that assumption thing because, again, a lot of us are shaking our cobwebs of some of the programming that we've been, again, subjected to. And so as a result of that infiltration of this program inside of us, it's like now we're trying to see the truth, but we got this obstacle in our mind because of what has infiltrated. Once you get past a lot of this stuff, you're going to see some things or understand some things in ways you never thought of. And so it doesn't make you, anything special. It just makes you more aware is what it does. And as a result of that awareness, then you start seeing the patterns more and more of what's really going on. All of a sudden, we went from genetically engineering the food supply. First we started spraying pesticides on the food supply. That's what was initially started. Then we started, hybriding the plants, right? Cross-pollination, cross-breeding, taking the limb of this and connecting to a stem of that, and seeing the hybridization of plants being formed. Then we went into the genetics. We could go into the genetics and take the proteins and tell the proteins what to do by inserting a golden pod within the seed, which then, when the proper time came for the enzymes to become active, those are proteins again. Programming then would tell those proteins what to do, what to trigger, how to trigger, what to trigger, in order for that seed to take hold and grow in the direction that it again was programmed. That's how infiltration works. And a lot of you have been infiltrated and don't even fully realize the infiltration process because we all eat. Even breatharians, those people saying, they're breathing off the air in the sun, they're breathing in nano. Okay, they're not going to be absolved from this. They're breathing it in. It may take a little longer to get the access and the loading up of the program in the system, but once it gets activated, they'll be in no better shape than anybody else. Same with the vegans. Vegans are basically super saturated with these nanoparticulates, which then is going to affect them even more so in any kind of morphology that is again deemed part of the program. You know, meat eaters also are going to have an affliction of this. Again, the animals can eat and filter out some of this, but you're still going to be assaulted. There is no stone unturned here. Okay, no stone unturned. And when you look at the documentation that I've got in tonight's show, and you start looking at the engineered nanomaterials, whether they be in water or land or whatever place they're in, and how they can now, you know, create this network. I was reading about carbon C60 now. When they added sulfur and benzene to it, it was able to, once they heated it up and evaporated the benzene, the carbon and the sulfur immediately, almost instantly, produced a fibrous network. A network. Not just a fiber, but a fibrous network. And they were, again, saying that if they could put a cancer on the thing, that cancer would be, again, on the stuff. But they found as well that materials had grown exponentially on this webbing that they had. Cancer feeds on sugar. Carbon is a sugar, or vice versa. So what they did is they attracted it to this carbon, but then again it started to again utilize that carbon further create more networks. I said this for the longest time. Nanotechnology, nanobiology loves carbon, it loves sugar. We all need to have some, at least 50 grams a day. And if you may want to neutralize the effects of any sugar by taking zinc, manganese, or any kind of sulfur like NaC, garlic, to help regulate the insulin in the body so that the body doesn't shoot like crazy. If you do take a processed sugar, you must take these elements as well. There's other things you can take, but these are very accessible and reasonable, and you can find them almost anywhere. But the point here I'm trying to get across is when we're looking at how nanobiotech works in the environment, whether it's an aquatic environment, whether it's a land-based environment, whether it's an airborne environment, it doesn't respond like a normal material. It has a program response that is, again, gets perpetuated by the frequencies, not only to assemble, but to, again, spread out. When we're looking at a chemtrail spreading out, what we see sometimes what appears may be dust just expanding, but what that may actually be going on up there is a network of tubes are being formed, creating an extension of the initiated chemtrail. And when we see this extending, going out and out and out, that's how this stuff may actually be spreading using some form of nanotechnology and a program. It's like I said, when you're looking at things and you start seeing things that normally you would never have thought of, you know, and you begin to understand that how these things are networking and why we're all so sick. See, I'm not sure at this stage if we can, any of us can fully recover. And I'll say why I say this, not to be discouraging, but to be pragmatic here and realistic. As long as we're exposed to the environment we're exposed in, if we could leave the environments that we're in and consume foods that didn't have the nanotechnology in it or anything else, clean water, whatever, since you're not reloading the body up with any more new material, then what is there may be able to become completely, extracted out of the body, or it can be completely purged out of the body because you're no longer reloading the body. But when we're in this environment and we can reduce it down drastically, this is something we all can do. We can reduce it down drastically. Whether we'll ever be free of this thing, I do not know for sure. But speculatively, at this point, based on what I'm seeing, it's not going to happen until they stop chemtrailing the skies, until they stop genetically engineering our food supply, and until they stop adding nano to the food as well. You know, when you're looking at some of the things that we're talking about, Brian has been talking about, and I've been talking about, other people are now starting to talk about more and more. We're living in a bizarro world where machines run the show. And by activating specific frequencies, we can actually turn these machines on, causing undue problems and undue health issues in regarding to the whatever is in the system, whatever they put there. I have talked to women, a lot of them. I talked to a lot of women, and I talk to guys too, but the bulk of the conversations I have are with women, because they have all been afflicted or affected by this technology. Some have had it for 20 and 30 years. They never knew what it was. They went to the doctor, spent a small fortune, and nobody helped them medically. And this is a disgrace. This is such a bloody disgrace that the medical field and the men and women in the medical field are such useless people when it comes to actually fixing people. They have absolutely no testicular fortitude whatsoever to do the right thing. They say, oh, I might lose my license. You know what? You can do something else. With the knowledge that you have, you can actually go out of the way and help people. Everybody that has spoken the truth in the medical field, they have shut down. Have you ever noticed that? 2 doctors in Italy come out and expose the nanoparticles in the vaccines. They've been shut down. The guys that talked about the GCMAF, they all wound up dead. Imagine that. Talking about a protein that the body's supposed to have. It was been taken out because of a vaccine that was given way back in the 1960s. And still being done today. Imagine that. Imagine a key element. And we're talking about vaccines back in the day, 1950s to 1960s, where you had maybe 5 vaccines, just 5, and they were done every year, so that the baby's immune system could then recover enough so they could take the next shot. Imagine that. 5 shots. Got booster as time went on. 5 shots. Just 5 shots. Imagine that. Imagine. I hope this recording is going, because I think this AI network is hitting my computer all of a sudden. 5 shots, not 70. And in those 5 shots, the GCMAF program was removed or disengaged or neutralized. Imagine in today's time. What is going on with these vaccines. Multiple vaccines loaded at the same time, never been tested, never been proven to work. None of them ever have, to be honest with you. And what's going on today? Imagine being injected with a genetically engineered material, nano delivered, into a host. What could possibly go wrong? Oh, perhaps a coronavirus can now be released into the general population because we have turned off people's DNA and genetic code that would trigger the body's biodefenses to protect the body from such a virus. Imagine that. Imagine that. Because we have, again, predetermined to create this anomaly, so that if we want to release a biological pathology that might have been genetically engineered with nanotechnology, we can have now an AI network set up so that now we can put into the host a condition which then may trigger a hyperactivity because of the nano that's already in the system, creating another kind of morphology that we, again, would never have expected. And now the doctors are baffled. Oh, we don't know what to do. See, the medical field has yet to acknowledge nanopoisoning. They've yet to acknowledge it. They know it's there. They know what's going on. They have already seen the effects of the nano from the chemtrails and from the food supply alone. Yet, nothing gets done. And they knew about nanoparticles since the 1960s because they were designing and coming up with things in order to neutralize the nano coming out of the stacks at the time by again, high 220,000 volt static dischargers that would cook the particulates. Didn't stop the nano from coming out. It just basically reduced them down to a real fine dust that wasn't such a burden on the environment. But think about this whole thing. Like I said, when you look at the theme of the show tonight, and you look at what I put out there, regarding to, all the different things, the video, new breed, bots on the social media. Are you talking to a bot or a person you don't really know anymore? Nano food, and how they tell us all this bullshit. There is no nano in the food. See, like I said, we have to quit being so trusting to the authorities because they are they're not worth the trust. They're basically prostitutes bought and paid for by corporations or corporocracies to create the anomalies that they're creating in the food supply and then telling you it's safe. The fact that now we're having victims coming in from all over the world, everywhere in the planet, coming to our countries, our respective countries, irrespective of where you live. People being allowed coming in from China without being examined, thoroughly checked over, coming in, and then maybe the infection gets triggered. Now think about this for a minute. Coming out of China, and you're flying, and you got to fly to the United States. It's a 12-hour flight, maybe a 20-hour flight coming into the U.S. or Canada. Going to Europe, maybe it's a 15-hour flight. So in 15 hours, this thing hasn't incubated, or it has incubated, but now it's waiting for the on switch. Something to think about. Something to think about. Now, the meat's always being knocked. You ever notice that? You can't eat meat, you can't eat dairy. Oh, they're bad for you, they're bad for you. They can cause cancer, they can cause cancer, they can cause cancer. And then the vegans will jump on some anti-meat bandwagon. Oh, the meat, blah, 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 and all that, and I still think they're idiots, most of them, but anyhow. But the assault on meat may actually be coming from people that have a special interest in knocking meat. For instance, people in the soy board or in the rice board, and they want to sell their rice and soy products as a meat product, like tofu or miso, not miso, but what the other, kimchi and all these other things. You may be making meat out of miso. See, my point is this: you got to be able to read and understand what you're reading, and then also determine who's putting out what and who is gaining from this publication. Meat doesn't cause cancer. It never did cause cancer. And everyone's talking to me, well, the Chinese study the Chinese study was nothing more than the Japanese study that was revamped from the 80s. I remember that study. And the study was flawed. It was flawed in the 80s and it's flawed now. Meat does not cause cancer. It never did cause cancer. It's what they're feeding the cattle that could be the problem. Because whatever the animal eats, you're going to eat. So then they came out with this whole anti-meat thing, and then you had the royal family coming out saying, oh, you shouldn't eat meat, all the animals, oh, look at the slaughter, the animals, we love animals. Yet they drink unpasteurized milk and they eat eggs. And don't think for 1 minute they're not eating the steak that you would otherwise be eating. And an interesting concept, don't you think? An interesting concept. There was another concept where the AI could actually work as a deceiver. for us. They were showing a picture of a spot in the moon or whatever, and they found that the artificial intelligence looked at it and thought it saw something else, and then when it responded to the question or whatever, what it saw, again, it was an error, total error. So it was like, okay, we got AI that we're supposed to be relying on heavily to determine so many different things, and yet here it is, saying what everybody else is saying, being misled like everybody else. Don't put your faith in technology. Never. Technology is just a tool, another tool like money, and like any other thing in the system to help us get through life and evolve to the next level. And it is not perfect. It has tons of flaws, whether it be computer, language, whatever. Okay. And again, it based on the information that it has and how it interprets the information is going to determine its response to the people that are querying the AI network. You know, right now it still needs to be double checked, even though it can deal with volumes of information, 200 million documents in mere seconds. It again analyzes everything based on how it sees things, and it's algorithm. So always double check whatever you're doing. Always, always, always. Especially if you're using a calculator or any other device. Always check and double check. Don't assume nothing today. You don't have the luxury to assume really anything. Especially when it comes to your money and finances and the controls that are involved that can affect your finances. These are things that make you go bump in the night kind of thing, you know. It's the way, this is the world we're living in today. And the only way I can see getting around this at this stage is, again, everybody who is awake has to start uniting and coming up with brainstorm ideas in order to create protective walls or protective areas where we're not affected by technologies that could be problematic. They want to build a groundhog robot. Can you believe this? A groundhog bot to replace the groundhog in Pennsylvania. I don't know how cute. How quick. And then another one sent me this, how they're arming the albatrosses over there in New Zealand with technology. So they can spy on the boats that are in the perimeter. Yeah, this is what's going on, and they're showing you these things not because this is what they're going to use it for. They may use it in regard to that, but they may be using it more to spy on their own people. Again, this is a frequency. Imagine having an albatross flying with some kind of device that can fire frequencies. Eventually, we're not going to have the animals around us like we have today because they'll be wiped out by the chemtrails and the nanofibers that would grow inside these animals and kill them, alter their DNA. But we may have, up the way, machines that may, again, replicate what we once had. Will appear lifelike, more so. You know, it's not a place that I would find interesting or intriguing. I prefer to have the real deal, but again, this is where we're at. Okay, I'm always talking about, at the end of the shows, about supporting people that are really trying to do something. You got Brian396 with his nano assembly videos, photos, and you've got his dad in research. So go check him out. Help him any way you can. If you feel that you can, if you can't give, then share the information. That would be the best thing. You know, everybody contributes somehow, then this information will get out and people will start to actively brainstorm and come up with ideas. You got the AirMac channel. Here's a channel on health and current trends and health assault. AirMac, you know, Yanni's putting out some pretty good stuff, so go check him out. Again, support him any way you can. Then you got myself at augmentedforce.com. You know, the alternatives to the alternative. And then you got the YouTube network. Again, that's another one that, again, is alternatives to the alternatives, but in video format. Do-it-yourself site we got on the BitChute channel. I just put up 2 new videos last week, and they're already turning out good. So people are actually looking at them. So again, you know, you got all this information. It's free and accessible. So feel free to help anybody you want, any way you can. And if you can't, you know, do something financial, that's fine. Then try to share the information. Share the sites, share the links, share everything. Alrighty. Wow, we're at the end of the month, and here we are. So now, starting a new month, a couple of days, there'll be another show. We'll be in February. It flew by, didn't it? Says the Bible, days will be getting shortened. Seems what's going on. Something to, again, think about. All right, till the next segment, to your health. Again, share the health, share the wealth, and try to apply what is being said. All right, take care.